Yesterday, I made a video about oil crossing $90 a barrel. I told you what that number meant for gas, for groceries, for rent, for the stock market, for the Federal Reserve, and for the economy you live inside every day. I told you that every week oil stayed at 90, the damage would compound. I told you that if it crossed 100, the situation would change from painful to potentially catastrophic. It crossed 100 today. As of this morning, March 12, 2026, Brent crude oil hit $100 per barrel. That is a 66% increase from where it was before the war started 13 days ago. It's the first time oil has been at this level since the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And the circumstances this time are worse. Because in 2022, the U.S. economy was adding jobs. Today, the U.S. economy is losing them. In 2022, the Federal Reserve had room to raise rates aggressively. Today, the Fed is trapped between rising inflation and a contracting labor market. In 2022, the Strait of Hormuz was open. Today, Iran is actively mining it. I made a video about 90 oil less than a week ago. I said if it stayed there, the damage would compound every week. I didn't expect to be making this video this soon, but here we are. And the numbers are significantly worse than they were when I last sat down to talk to you. So let me walk you through exactly what has changed, what's happening right now, and what a $100 barrel of oil actually means for you, your family, and the economy. Let me start with what happened in the last 72 hours, because the situation in the Strait of Hormuz has escalated beyond what most analysts were projecting. On March 11th, at least 6 commercial vessels were attacked in and around the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. Iranian boats laden with explosives struck 2 oil tankers near Iraq's southern ports overnight, killing at least 1 crew member. Hours earlier, 3 other commercial ships had been hit with projectiles in the Gulf. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed responsibility for at least one of the attacks. A Thai-flagged bulk carrier that was set ablaze after, according to the IRGC, it disobeyed their orders. But the attacks on ships are not the most dangerous development. The mines are. 2 sources have confirmed that Iran has deployed approximately a dozen naval mines in the Strait of Hormuz in the last few days. Naval mines are underwater explosive devices designed to destroy or damage ships that pass over or near them. They are cheap to build, easy to deploy, and extraordinarily difficult to remove. A single mine can sink a tanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil. The presence of mines in a shipping lane, even the suspicion of mines, is enough to shut down commercial traffic entirely because no insurance company on Earth will cover a vessel transiting a mined waterway. That's the whole game right there. That's it. Mines in the water. That's all it takes. You don't need to sink a fleet. You don't need to close the strait with warships. You drop 12 mines into 6 miles of shipping lane and the global economy loses 20% of its oil supply. 12 mines. That's the cost of shutting down the world's most important trade route. President Trump responded yesterday by claiming the strait is in great shape. His exact words, "We've knocked out all of their boats. They have some missiles, but not very many." The oil market did not agree with that assessment. The price kept climbing. A spokesperson for Iran's military command issued a statement directed at the United States that I want you to hear in full context because it tells you exactly what Iran's strategy is. The spokesperson said, "Get ready for oil to be $200 a barrel because the oil price depends on regional security, which you have destabilized." And I have to be honest with you, when I saw the 200 number, I thought it was clickbait. Then I looked at who said it and where they said it. It wasn't clickbait. It was a threat. Iran's entire leverage in this war is not its military. It's the strait. Iran knows that it cannot win a direct military confrontation with the United States, but it doesn't need to. It just needs to keep oil prices climbing high enough, long enough, to make the economic cost of the war unbearable. $200 a barrel would be the most expensive oil in history, and Iran's strategy is explicitly designed to get there. Now let me tell you the cost so far, because the Pentagon just gave Congress its first official number. According to the Associated Press, citing a person familiar with a congressional briefing, the Pentagon reported that the first week of Operation Epic Fury cost the United States $11.3 billion. Not the $8 billion I estimated last week. 11.3. That's higher than any independent analysis had projected. The cost is running above $1 billion a day and accelerating. 140 American service members have been wounded. 7 have been killed. Those numbers were confirmed by the Pentagon this week and represent the first official accounting of U.S. casualties. On the civilian side, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees announced today that up to 3.2 million people inside Iran have been displaced by the war. Most have fled Tehran and other major cities toward the north of the country or rural areas. Over 1,300 Iranian civilians have been killed, according to the Iranian Red Crescent. UNICEF says at least 181 children are among the dead. This is day 13 of the war. The president has not articulated a clear timeline for its conclusion. His demand remains unconditional surrender from Iran. Now let me connect the $100 barrel to your daily life, because this is where the numbers stop being abstract and start being personal. When oil was at 90, gas prices jumped 27 cents in a single week. At 100, the trajectory gets steeper. Every $10 increase in the price of a barrel of crude oil translates to roughly 25 to 30 cents per gallon at the pump, depending on refining capacity and regional markets. If oil holds at 100, you should expect the national average for gasoline to rise past $4.50 a gallon within the next 2 to 3 weeks. If oil goes to 120, which multiple analysts are now projecting as a realistic scenario if the strait remains disrupted, gas could approach $5 a gallon nationally and exceed $6 in high-cost markets like California. But gas is just the visible cost. The invisible costs are what actually break the economy. Diesel is the blood of the supply chain. Every truck, every freight train, every cargo ship that moves physical goods through the American economy runs on diesel. When diesel goes from $3.50 to $5 a gallon, which is where it's heading if oil stays above 100, the cost of moving everything increases. Every box of cereal, every gallon of milk, every piece of lumber, every Amazon package, every medication delivered to a pharmacy, all of it costs more to move, and all of those costs get passed to you. Airlines are in crisis mode. Jet fuel is their single largest operating expense. When jet fuel doubles in price in 2 weeks, the math doesn't work. American Airlines, United, Delta, Southwest, all of them have seen their stocks hammered this week. Air Canada has suspended routes. Flight cancellations are mounting. If you're planning to fly anywhere in the next 3 months, expect to pay significantly more. If oil hits 120, some regional carriers may not survive. Food is next. I explained this in the $90 video, but it's accelerating. Fertilizer prices are rising because natural gas, which is used to manufacture fertilizer, is also spiking due to disruptions to liquefied natural gas exports through the Persian Gulf. Farmers are paying more to produce food. Truckers are paying more to move food. Retailers are paying more to stock food. You are paying more to eat food. This cascade was already in motion at 90. At 100, it accelerates. If you are watching this and finding it useful for understanding what is happening to your money right now, subscribe. I'm going to keep making these as long as the situation demands it. No network, no sponsors, just me and the data. Every subscription helps these reach more people. Now let me tell you about the emergency response, because the government is not standing still. It's just not clear whether what they're doing is enough. Energy Secretary Chris Wright announced yesterday that President Trump has authorized the release of 172 million barrels from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve starting next week. The SPR is the emergency stockpile of crude oil that the United States maintains for exactly this kind of crisis. It's stored in underground salt caverns along the Gulf of Mexico coast. This is a massive release. 172 million barrels is nearly half of the SPR's current capacity. The reserve was already drawn down significantly during the 2022 energy crisis, when the Biden administration released approximately 180 million barrels to combat high gas prices. It has not been fully replenished since. But the U.S. is not acting alone. The International Energy Agency, a coalition of 32 member nations, has coordinated a combined release of 400 million barrels from emergency reserves across all member countries. This is the largest coordinated emergency release in the IEA's history. For context, the IEA released 60 million barrels during the 2011 Libya crisis and 60 million during the 2005 Hurricane Katrina disruption. 400 million is unprecedented. The strategy is straightforward. Flood the market with stored oil to offset the loss of supply from the Persian Gulf and bring prices down. It's the economic equivalent of using a fire extinguisher. It can work temporarily. The question is, what happens after? So we're releasing emergency oil reserves that took decades to build to buy ourselves a few months of breathing room. What happens when the reserves run out and the strait is still closed? The answer is that nobody knows. Because the SPR release is a finite resource, once the oil is released, it's gone. Refilling the reserve requires purchasing oil on the open market, which means buying at whatever the market price is at that time. If oil is at 100 when we drain the reserve, it could be at 120 when we try to refill it. The emergency measure that's supposed to save money could end up costing more than the crisis itself. The market's reaction to the SPR announcement has been muted. Oil dipped briefly below 100 on the news, but climbed right back. That tells you something important. The market does not believe that releasing reserves is sufficient to solve the problem. The market believes the disruption to supply from the Strait of Hormuz is structural, not temporary. And as long as the war continues and Iran keeps mining the strait, no amount of reserve releases will permanently bring the price down. Daniel Yergin, the Pulitzer Prize-winning energy historian, wrote this week that the current situation represents potentially the biggest disruption in oil production in history. Iraq alone has cut output by 60%. Kuwait and UAE exports are severely impacted. The Persian Gulf, which produces roughly a quarter of the world's oil, is effectively a war zone. The reserves can bridge a gap. They cannot replace a quarter of global production. Let me tell you what the experts are saying now, because the tone has changed dramatically from last week. Mark Zandi at Moody's said that if oil stays above 100, a recession becomes more likely than not. Last week, his language was cautious, on the edge. This week, the edge is closer. An analyst, quoted by Fox 2 Detroit, summarized it plainly. The first week cost $11.3 billion. The second week will cost more. Every week the war continues, the bill compounds, and the economic damage deepens. Energy Secretary Wright was asked directly on CNN whether the U.S. can declare victory without reopening the Strait of Hormuz. His answer was unambiguous. No, the strait needs to be and will be reopened. That's an acknowledgement that the war's success is not measured only in military targets destroyed. It's measured in whether the global economy's most important shipping lane is restored. Right now, it's not. And here's the number that ties everything together. When oil was at 67 before the war, the economy was already weak. The February jobs report was negative. Consumer sentiment was declining. Small businesses were pulling back. Housing was frozen. The economy had no margin for error. I covered all 5 of those warning signs in detail in my last video. Now add $33 per barrel to every calculation, every cost estimate, every business plan, every household budget, every airline route, every trucking contract, every grocery store price tag, every fertilizer purchase, every heating bill. $33 per barrel on top of an economy that was already cracking. That's the difference between 90 and 100. At 90, it was painful. At 100, the pain becomes structural. Businesses don't just raise prices at 100. They start canceling orders. They start laying off workers. They start closing locations. And when businesses start doing that across multiple sectors simultaneously, the economy doesn't slow down, it contracts. I want to be clear. I'm not declaring a recession. The data doesn't support that declaration yet. But the data does support something that is almost as alarming. The conditions for a recession are now all present at the same time, and the external shock that could trigger one, oil above 100, has arrived. Whether it triggers or not depends on one variable: how long oil stays here. If the war ends in the next 2 weeks and the strait reopens, oil falls back, the reserves help bridge the gap, and the economy absorbs the shock. That's the optimistic scenario. Most geopolitical disruptions are short-lived. History favors the optimistic scenario, but President Trump wants unconditional surrender. Iran is mining the strait. Hezbollah has opened a second front in Lebanon. The humanitarian crisis is escalating. 3.2 million people are displaced. 140 American troops are wounded, and the market is not pricing in a quick resolution. The pessimistic scenario is that oil stays above 100 for weeks or months. In that scenario, the reserve releases buy time, but don't solve the problem. Inflation reaccelerates, the Fed cannot cut rates. Consumer spending collapses, businesses lay off workers. The job market, which is already negative, deteriorates further. And the word that economists have been whispering for 2 weeks, stagflation, becomes the defining economic reality of 2026. Iran's military spokesperson said $200. That's their goal. They want to make this war so expensive for the global economy that the pressure to stop it comes not from the battlefield, but from the gas pump, the grocery store, and the ballot box. It's working. Swing voters who helped re-elect Trump in 2024 are turning against the war. NPR reported today that these voters don't support the decision to go to war with Iran and want to see tax dollars spent tackling economic pressures at home. 60% of Americans disapprove of the military action. 61% disapprove of the president's handling of the economy. The midterm elections are 8 months away. The political math and the economic math are converging on the same point. This war has to end before the economic damage becomes permanent. But nobody has said when. And every day without an answer, the price goes up. $100. That was supposed to be the number that couldn't happen. It happened. Now the only question is, what comes next? And nobody has an answer.